maybe hold it for a second as we wait for others to join us on this morning broadcast. It's a Monday morning, a bright Monday morning, quite shiny out there down in Kampala, Uganda. And thanks for joining us from wherever it is that you could be joining us. I do appreciate you. Do not forget to like the broadcast, comment, and share so that we get more traffic to our channel. But for those of you that do watch our broadcasts much later after we're done with the live broadcasts, we do not take your time for granted. We do appreciate you for the efforts and the time you do put in. I'll try to keep this maybe short. I do not know. Sometimes these conversations drag on, but that's the nature of sport or football. Anyways, I wanted us to speak about the impressive United game against Leicester City. Manchester United keep getting better and better. So do I think. I think over the last 3 or 4 games, they've shown us that they are getting better and better because yesterday's result, a perfect score prediction, at least for us here on Football Tribe UG, because my prediction was a 3-0 victory for Manchester United, and that was the case there from the Leicester City Stadium as Manchester United beat them by 3 goals to 0 in a game that I thought they were quite impressive on the day. There were so many good performances that we can call on. Of course, the unfortunate outcome of the game was Eindhoven suffering what was feared to be a very serious leg injury there, and he had to be stretched off at the time when Manchester United are really stretched with injuries in their backline, with the absence of Harry Maguire, the absence of Lisandro Martinez, the absence of Lenny Yoro, who also got injured in their 1-1 draw against Arsenal. So quite for me, very impressive that we witnessed Manchester United yesterday. They kicked off the game in high spirits. Christian Eriksen coming close to breaking the deadlock, but that shot, missing the target by just a couple of inches. I think hitting the upright there, and then United went on with their efforts until that moment when Bruno Fernandez, by the way, conjured up something to provide, I think, his 8th assist of this season as Rasmus Højlund ended his 21-game goal drought in the Premier League when he slotted that ball in the bottom corner. I mean, very impressive goal. Bruno Fernandez's sight for attacking players and his ability to play that pass in between the defenders or in between the channels, the lines, to spot the other player was quite, for me, very impressive as United broke the deadlock in that one. So 1-0 it was at halftime. Leicester City, again, very underwhelming, so to speak, but United, for me, were the better side. In the second half, Leicester City tried to improve. They tried to be the better team. They tried to press on, but couldn't find the breakthrough. And then United go on to score through Alejandro Garnacho, but that goal was ruled out by VAR. At least even the linesman had already signaled that the Argentine had been in an offside position when he went on to score that goal. So clearly, it did not turn out the way they had hoped. But they kept on probing, and then that is the captain, Bruno Fernandez, again, after his first initial pass, I think, was intercepted, and then he got the chance to do it over, and he slots it into the path of Alejandro Garnacho as he made, I think, his 9th assist of the season. And then Alejandro Garnacho, with the first time hit, he did not hesitate whatsoever. It's like he had the sight of goal in his mind, and he slotted that ball in the bottom corner to make it 2-0, and that goal did stand. So that goal in particular, I thought, for me, did come at least the one of play in terms of who was dominating affairs at that moment in the game. But every time United went forward, you felt that they did threaten that they would score, similar to what we had witnessed in their 1-1 draw against Arsenal the previous weekend, similar to what we witnessed on Thursday when they were beating up against Real Sociedad by 4 goals to 1. they always had that goal threat whenever they came into the final third. And moments later, of course, as the game dragged on late on, Diego Dalot, who did score in midweek against Real Sociedad, provided the assist, a very, very brilliant cutback for captain Bruno Fernandez to score. And I mean, he took that opportunity impressively. Again, he did not hesitate, even to him, faster. He passes played into him, and he takes it first time to catch literally the keeper off guard, and United win the game 3-0. Before it was 3-0, Leicester City had an opportunity to pull one back through Jamie Vardy, but I mean, Matthijs De Ligt, no, it wasn't Matthijs De Ligt, I think, but he could not convert. I think Onana saved that one. But then also Leicester City had another opportunity, but Matthijs De Ligt put his body on the line literally and blocked that one out. I think he's back causing a penalty in their 4-1 victory against Real Sociedad. Matthijs De Ligt has been one of the best players of this Manchester United side in the last couple of games. He's been quite very impressive. But like I said, Eindhoven was equally having a good game. Unfortunately, he had to go off injury as United's defensive problems, raged on. Like I highlighted already, they were without Lisandro Martinez, Harry Maguire, Lenny Yoro, Johnny Evans, all out through injury. So literally, and again, they will need to have luck on their side that at least in the aftermath of the international break and beyond the FA Cup weekend, they will have welcomed some defensive options back, because otherwise it will necessitate a Casemiro or a Emmanuel Ugarte to be played in that backline, because things are not really looking pretty for them in regards to injury. So very, very impressive performance. Over the last 4 games, I thought United have been quite decent. In their away trip to Real Sociedad, they were the better team overall. So although they drew that one against Arsenal, again, I thought they were the better team. They looked the much better team to, if there was a probability of winning, United looked the most probable side to win that particular game. Like I keep saying, it was to the heroics of David Raya that Arsenal were able to secure a point in that particular game, and then went on to beat Real Sociedad in the reverse fixture of the Europa League 4-1. Again, very impressive. Captain Bruno Fernandez with a hat-trick in that one, and Diego Dalot on the score sheet. So like I mentioned, Matthijs De Ligt, Eindhoven, Captain Bruno Fernandez, Alejandro Garnacho have been the highlights in that cohort of games. They've been some of the better performers. And then Rasmus Højlund, of course, we ought to give him his flowers, because in the moment when he scores that goal, one would think that he was devoid of confidence. If he had missed, we wouldn't be surprised and all that. But as a striker, he chose to be selfish and took that ball in his stride and fired it home. So clearly, a very, very impressive performance there from the young Dutch striker. So for me, I did really enjoy his performance. But Mads Hermansen, that's the goalkeeper for Leicester City. In the goal for Alejandro Garnacho, you thought he could have done better to sort of try and keep his side in the game, because usually the difference with winning the game or getting a point in games is you having a very good goalkeeper that when your defenders fall short, he is going to rise to the occasion and make for you that brilliant save. We saw it in Arsenal's victory against Chelsea. Although Chelsea were not able to come back in the game, but Robert Sanchez made a crucial game when that game is still at 1-0. He made a very crucial save over Mikel Merino's attempt. That ball was on the line, really. So he made that save. We saw it on David Raya making those, triple saves, about 3 saves in that game against Manchester United. We all remember that. So clearly, you need a goalkeeper that is going to rise to the occasion. And I thought and I thought Mads Hermansen failed in that attempt. Hey, Royland, thank you for tuning in. Do not forget to like the podcast. Anyway, so I thought United for me were quite very impressive, and I mean Manuel Ugarte in that midfield, Mazzoli, Diego Dalot, like I mentioned, Christian Eriksen, Bruno Fernandez, quite very impressive. Victor Lindelof, they did a very good job in that United team. Yes, Khalid Nadim, is it Khalid? Yes, Khalid and Nadi. Thank you for joining the broadcast and thank you for liking the podcast. So, anyways, it was, like I said, it was a perfect score prediction for us here on Footballtribeug, and that result, I think, puts United in a much better position in regards on not just table standings, but in terms of point tally. And when you look at the 9 remaining games, you sort of give them a chance that if they can go ahead and have an impressive run and win maybe 5 games on a spin. There is a Manchester United fan whose name I have forgotten, has not cut his hair in a long while, saying he's waiting for Manchester United to win 5 consecutive games. That's 2 on board. That's 2 on board. And because they won against Real Sociedad in midweek, they've beaten up against Leicester City. So clearly, it's really good to go for him to take off before he goes back to the barber shop. But anyway, the result elevated Manchester United to 13th place on the Premier League log with 37 points. Now, it's a difference of 7 points between them and a 10th place AFC Bournemouth on the Premier League table. So you believe if they go on a good run, they can rise to the first page of the Premier League standings. But we'll not dwell on that. In the other results on the day, Fulham beat up against Tottenham Hotspur by 2-0. Rodrigo Muniz and Ryan Sessegnon on target there for the Cottagers as they won that particular game by 2-0. Then Arsenal, Mikel Moreno's header was enough to secure all 3 points against Chelsea. So many injuries that Chelsea had to deal with or have had to deal with in recent times, but Arsenal picking all the 3 points to sort of restore their 4 points gap between them and the third place Nottingham Forest, who on Saturday had beaten up against Ipswich Town by 4-2. So it is 58 points for the Gunners and 54 points for Nottingham Forest. Liverpool still lead the pile with 70 points, so it's a 12-point gap. There, we'll be discussing Liverpool in just a bit. So that was the Premier League. So away from the Premier League, we do run briefly to the Spanish La Liga, where we did witness a very impressive game. Now, if you ever find Barcelona down to 7 men playing up against Atletico Madrid, please bet on Barcelona to win, because, I mean, it does not matter. Just a couple of weeks back, we did witness Atletico Madrid take a 2-0 lead against Barcelona in I think the semi-finals of the Copa del Rey first leg. Atletico Madrid takes a 2-0 lead. Barcelona come from 2 goals down and, bring it to level to 2-2. Then they score another 2 goals to lead it 4-2. Never mind that Barcelona themselves capitulated and the game ended in a 4-4 draw. Now, they are meeting in the La Liga standings. You fancy Atletico Madrid, they are at home. They want this game more than anything, because if they win, they go above Barcelona on the La Liga table standings, and then be just a point behind Real Madrid, who at the time were leading the La Liga table with 60 points. They had everything to fight for, and then they went on and they had a very impressive game, at least for 70 minutes. They go into a 2-0 lead and they squandered that again. Because the manner in which it happened. Lamine Yamal, what a player. Rafinha, what a season he's having. Ferran Torres, what a squad player to hold on to in such a game. He scored a brace. Robert Lewandowski, the way he takes that ball to score the first goal, that is the consolation for Barcelona. I think around the 72nd minute mark, thereabout. Very, very impressive. Barcelona could win it all. They could win the La Liga, they could win the UEFA Champions League. Because while they concede plenty of goals, they score just as much or even more. And that's the sort of threatening side about this Barcelona side. They may concede a lot of goals, but they do score in plenty. Just to check if our microphone is still on. Who wouldn't want to run into the troubles that we had over the weekend? Anyways, Julian Alvarez opened the scoring in the 45th minute to give Atletico Madrid the halftime lead there in that game. And then, of course, we had Sloth score to double Atletico Madrid's lead, and that is at the 70-minute mark. And where I was seated watching this game, I was like, oh, for the first time, maybe Atletico Madrid is going to beat up against Barcelona. Okay, in recent times, because you hardly remember any victories for Atletico Madrid against Barcelona. But I thought maybe this is the day that they get to beat Barcelona. But fate had other ideas, or destiny had other ideas. And 2 minutes later, Robert Lewandowski scored to pull one back. And then 6 minutes later, Ferran Torres scores to level the game. And it's 2-2. So, 2 assists in this game for Rafinha. Like I said, he's having a very impressive season. And then, I think the additional time was what? 8 minutes or thereabout. In the 92nd minute, Lamine Yamal scores. Of course, his shot was deflected beyond the reach of Jan Oblak in goal, but that is what it is. I mean, it won't matter. Does it matter to Jan Oblak? It does. But for Barcelona, it doesn't matter. Lamine Yamal, very brilliant strike. It's deflected beyond the reach of Jan Oblak, and suddenly it's 3-2. Then Atletico Madrid try to fight their way back into at least securing the point. They throw everything they had at the game, all their numbers forward, and then Barcelona catch them on the break. And suddenly it's 4-2. Ferran Torres, Rafinha providing the assist for Ferran Torres to score the fourth. And it ended 4-2. And it was victory for Barcelona. You should have seen Hansi Flick, the way he celebrated when all those goals were being scored, especially the equalizer from Ferran Torres, then the goal that makes the difference, Lamine Yamal celebrating, taking off his shirt. Of course, he got a booking for that. And then that fourth goal from Ferran Torres, you could see what it meant to the manager in Hans Flick. And Barcelona reclaimed their top slot on the La Liga summit. Yeah, they have a goal difference of 48, and Real Madrid have a goal difference of 32. So clearly, that's a difference of what? 16 goals between the two sides, but they are all tied to 60 points. After 28 games, Barcelona have a game in hand. So they do have, they have played 27 games. Atletico Madrid are still 4 points adrift of the two leading toppers of the table, but that's not too big a point difference. It's something they can recover, but now they've lost two consecutive games. Last weekend, they lost to Getafe by 2-1, and now they lost to Barcelona by 4-2. So it didn't look pretty. And yet, Athletic Bilbao, who are in fourth place, beat up against Sevilla by 0-0 to close that gap between them and a third place Atletico Madrid. So the point difference between Atletico Madrid and Athletic Bilbao, who are in fourth place, is just 4 points. So clearly, Atletico Madrid will be looking over their shoulders that Athletic Bilbao are chasing them down. Anyways, allow me close, the La Liga and Premier League at that, and we discuss Newcastle. Newcastle, very impressive. Liverpool, I think this was the worst game they played this season. They looked horrible. The best player this season across Europe in Mohamed Salah, at a certain stage in the game, could only afford 3 touches on the ball in 3 minutes. That's how poor Liverpool were on the day. Newcastle beating them by 2-1 to win the 2025 Carabao Cup, their first major trophy in 70 years. the first major domestic cup or trophy in 70 years. The last time they had won the FA Cup, that was a domestic cup, was back in 1955. And then the last major trophy across board that they had, last one was in 1969. 1969 in the Intercities Fairs Cup. That's the last time they had picked up silverware. And yet in recent times, of course, they had been to Wembley. In 2023, we saw them lose by 2-0 against Manchester United in the Carabao Cup final. Casemiro and Rashford scoring for Manchester United in that particular final. But this time around, they just wanted it more. Newcastle showed they wanted it more. They played with a lot of energy, with a lot of strength. They won the midfield battle, like that midfield battle that we had discussed in the preview between Alessandro Tonali, Bruno Guimaraes, and Joelinton versus Ryan Gravenberch, Alexis McAllister, and Dominic Szoboszlai. They won that hands down. Hands down. They were the better side. They showed more energy. They were more tenacious. It showed that Liverpool were not rested. Newcastle had been well rested because Liverpool in midweek were suffering defeat, getting knocked out of the UEFA Champions League on penalties at the hands of PSG. That sort of wear and tear, that disappointment from midweek was still worn on their faces. You could see it on Virgil van Dijk. And so it was Dan Burn who scored the header to put Newcastle ahead. Of course, that goal again coming after Kelleher had to make a couple of saves. So Newcastle were simply impressive on the ball, off the ball, and in everything. They fought for the 50-50s. They knocked Liverpool up and down. They clipped them whenever it needed to be, and that kind of thing. So they were simply very, very impressive on the day. And then Alexander Isak, we discussed this one, that in the absence of Anthony Gordon, and he will have to play with Jacob Murphy and Harvey Barnes, and those are the players he had to play with on the front lines. And we said that if Newcastle had to have any chance of winning this cup, he had to step up, and the Swedish international did step up indeed. In the first half, he didn't have a very good game, but in the second half, he was simply brilliant. He scored one, which was cancelled out for offside, and then just in quick succession, or a couple of minutes later, he then scored one that could not be cancelled out. Jacob Murphy heading the ball in his path for him to slot it past Kelleher in goal. And there it was, 2-0. Mo Salah reduced to a pedestrian. Dominic Szoboszlai, Ryan Gravenberch, and McAllister in midfield out-battled, outshined. That defense of Newcastle, of Dan Burn, Fabian Schär, Livramento, Kieran Trippier stood tall. Nick Pope in goal did his duties whenever he was called upon. In that second half, I think it was Curtis Jones with an attempt of goal. He does well to save that one, to keep Newcastle in the game. Very, very brilliant. Then Diego Jota, Luis Diaz reduced to pedestrians. You could hardly see them. I think the most seen player in this game, the most seen Liverpool player for me was Virgil van Dijk, and that clearly tells you that he had to be fed a lot of times. So clearly, Newcastle for me were very dominant. They were more hungry. They were more hungry for silverware. Remember, Liverpool were the reigning champions of the Carabao Cup, having won it in 2024, beating up against Chelsea by 0-0, a goal scored by Virgil van Dijk in extra time. But yesterday, they were outsmarted and outwitted in all measures, as Ed Howe guided Newcastle to their first piece of silverware as far as domestic cups are concerned in 70 years, and their first piece of silverware since 1969 when they won the Fairs Cup. He becomes the first English manager to win a major trophy since Harry Redknapp in 2008, who guided Portsmouth to the FA Cup when they beat up, I think, against Cardiff City by 0-0. So very impressive. Some of you do remember Harry Redknapp as a Tottenham Hotspur manager. You do remember him at Birmingham City. So very, very impressive, history there for Eddie Howe, as this is the first fruit of this Newcastle rebuild, of this Newcastle under their new ownership. Of course, they've made the investments in Lisandro Tonali, Alexander Isak, the likes of Livramento, all those players that Bruno Fernandez, all those players that they brought in this rebuild, the heavy bands that they've secured to, make Newcastle more competitive. Again, Steven Botman, although he was absent through injury, I mean, that investment started to pay off, at least showed signs of paying off yesterday. Now, regardless of where they finished in the Premier League table standings, they are sure of being in Europe next season. So, congratulations to all Newcastle fans out there in England. It was jubilations and tribulations in the city of Newcastle and elsewhere for Newcastle well-wishers. Pubs were filled, beer was drunk to, I think, to empty crates, and breweries in England. That's in the city of Newcastle. Well deserved. They did everything right. Of course, Federico Chiesa coming off the bench, he did pull one back, but it nearly turned out to be a consolation for Liverpool. But it was a very impressive goal that had initially been ruled cancelled out as an offside, but VAR showed us that the goal should stand. And I do remember a moment when the referee was explaining the decision that VAR had arrived at, trying to explain it to the crowd. And Federico Chiesa, whose command of the English language is not even is shorter than a miniskirt, he looked around in a way trying to make sense of what was happening. And then, of course, he looks to the stands to see Liverpool fans celebrating, and then that's when he joins his teammates in celebrating that consolation. Liverpool thinking that, or hoping that they could maybe go ahead and draw this game and push it into extra time, but it was never meant to be, and that did show. Of course, after that goal was confirmed and it was 2-1, there was a bit of tension in the stadium. All Newcastle was left to do was a bit of game management, and that game management was in the form of, wasting time, winning corners, and throw-ins in the Liverpool half, and that kind of thing. And they did that impressive. Of course, because that goal came in the 96th minute, stoppage time, 8 minutes had been added. They took about 2-3 minutes, I think, to make a decision on whether it was a goal, whether the goal should stand, and it stood. And then we continued, we resumed play, and Newcastle held their foot to win that game by 2-1. So very, very impressive there for Newcastle, as they won their first major trophy since 1969. And the first domestic cup since 1955. Maybe the result I do not want to go away with letting you know was Inter Milan further brightening their chances of recouping the Scudetto. Remember, they are the reigning champions because they did beat up against Napoli. Sorry, they did beat up against Atlanta by 2-0. Atlanta being reduced to 10 men in the 81st minute, when Ederson, the Brazilian international, was given a red card in the other. And then in France, Paris Saint-Germain did beat up against Marseille by 3-1. Ousmane Dembele on target in that one, as well as Nuno Mendes and Lirola there scored an own goal against his Marseille side, as PSG won that game by 3-1. Of course, PSG are just simply champions in waiting as far as the French League One standings are concerned, because they, after 26 games played, they do lead that 18 table team with 68 points. They have about a 19 points gap between them and the second place Marseille, who are at 49 points. Their goal difference is 48 compared to Marseille's 20. So clearly, they're just champions in waiting there. But allow me to keep it at that. Thank you for always tuning in. Thank you for those that join us live. Thank you for those that do watch our episodes or these live broadcasts much after we are done here. Stay blessed and have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye-bye.